Week 1 in the books. We don't do introductions here at Redraft in 5, but we do takeaways. Coop, tell me about your biggest takeaway from this week, the one biggest thing that you want to take away from all of this action. And we're recording this before Monday Night Football, so if Christian McCaffrey pops off for 45 points or Deebo Samuel scores 4 touchdowns, we missed that one because we're recording beforehand. What do you got?
What are you going to do, right? For me, Rasheed Shahed. So when we look at the info from week 1, there's stats, there's the usage, there's the scheme. It doesn't always align. Sometimes you have guys that have good stats, but they actually didn't really get good usage. Sometimes you have guys that have great usage, but it didn't pan out in terms of stats. With Shahed, everything came together the way we hoped. I mean, he popped off for the touchdown, the 60-yard touchdown, which he could always do that. The big thing was the scheme was set up exactly right, where they used a fullback for 20-something snaps, Adam Prentice, and that highly consolidated the snaps on the top 2 targets. And one of them happened to be Rasheed Shahed, played virtually the entire game opposite Chris Olave. In fact, he ran more routes than Chris Olave did, and he was the top target on the team. So they're bringing over that San Francisco, Miami, Texans offense that uses the fullback and highly consolidates everything among the top 2 guys. Shahed is one of those guys, and it translated right away into points.
Yeah, and we've got bags of him on a couple of our shared teams, but on our bench, we're going to get it, though, because I think he's back. He's in the flex for us next week. The one thing that I love seeing with Shahed was the air yard share, Coop. The air yard share were there, and that touchdown was the first touchdown of the game for the Saints. That was the first touchdown of the entire season. So for me, my biggest takeaway, it's easy, and it's a player that we were drafting a lot higher. I got back from Vegas, saw Scott Connor from Dynasty Trades in 5, and I saw a bunch of people we knew. Your boy Dan Williamson and I drafted a couple of monsters. At the end of the trip, I'm overexposed to Cooper Kupp. I just started drafting more and more Cooper Kupp as redraft kind of moved along, and it felt a little bit scary because of the injuries, but it's almost a perfect storm here. Cooper Kupp leads all NFL players in targets by a wide margin, 21 targets last night against the Lions. No other player had more than 12. It felt a little bit like we're talking about 2022, early 2023, early 2021 with Cooper Kupp, where they're putting him in motion, they're using him on every single scheme, and you'd watch these drives where he'd have like 3-4 catches on a drive. So it's sort of a perfect storm. You've got Puka Nacua banged up and Cooper Kupp stepping up, delivering wide receiver 1 overall type usage. Just like last year, Cooper Kupp gets banged up and Puka Nacua does that. So I think this next month, if you have Cooper Kupp in your lineup, we'll find out more about Puka as the week goes along, but there's some bad drum beats about that knee. For me, Cooper Kupp looks like he could be the league winner for people that drafted early and got him in the 4th round.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that year that Cooper Kupp set literally the record for the best season ever for a wide receiver, all year long, I sat here and I was like, they can't just keep doing this. They can't just feed this guy the whole time. And then they did for the entire regular season. And we got to the playoffs and I said, well, there's no way they're going to keep doing this. Obviously, teams are going to catch on. They're going to shut it down. And what happened? They didn't. They just kept doing it, went all the way through and won the Super Bowl. We've seen Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp use their bag of tricks to make this work. And you know what? If there's no Puka Nacua, they might have to do it again. 10, 15, 20 target games. Bing, bang, boom, man. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
It's absolutely incredible, and no one schemes it better than McVay. Right. What's your next big takeaway?
For me, it's Kyle Pitts here. And again, it would have been nice if the targets were there, right? We want all the pieces to the puzzle. But this is a brand new offense. It's a brand new quarterback. There's going to be some growing pains. But what we wanted to see was a better role than we saw last year. I mean, he did get 90 targets last year, which is the bare minimum we need to have top 5 upside. But, we had Jonathan Smith rotating in, very strange usage of fullback with Arthur Smith, and only one wide receiver actually playing full snaps. This past week, Kyle Pitts played 56 of 58 snaps, and he ran virtually every single route. He is a full-time player, and he's doing a ton of that from a wide receiver chair. He scored the touchdown this week, which is nice, but we care more about the usage than we do about random broken coverage touchdowns like we saw there. The usage is good. One of the only tight ends in the league that has his size, that has his speed, and now has a full-time role in an offense with Kirk Cousins, who is going to get it together. Kyle Pitts, man, for me, I feel very comfortable having him as my tight end, especially after what a nightmare the tight end situation was this week, right?
Yeah, and we talked about this sort of as a Kyle Pitts as the arbitrage way to get access to this ascending Atlanta offense. Like Coop, a lot of people right now, and Drake London's not toast, but Drake London, it's game 1, and I think a lot of people would trade where they had to select Drake London for where they could have had access to Kyle Pitts. And Coop, we got another, I mean, we're running so pure. We have another Kyle Pitts share on another one of our shared teams right now. Shout out to the NFFC. We've got an NFFC 350 team with some Kyle Pitts as a locked in, basically a wide receiver playing tight end for us. It's a great thing. And for me, I've sort of like been pounding the table for Devon Achane for forever. That's been a guy that like, you know, I've taken some flack for how bullish I was on him this past offseason. So I'm going to victory lap a little bit. Devon Achane, it's like perfect usage. He had a 19% target share, 7 targets, 7 catches. He ends up getting 10 carries and gets a touchdown on the ground. Like, we're talking about Devon Achane dominated usage. And it wasn't just that. It's for him to be the clear-cut number 3 target on this team is absolutely massive for him. We know that the big rushing weeks will happen. And also, this player is absolutely one that I would scoop up on waivers if your league is cutting him, because Jalen Wright still has huge contingent upside if Achane or Mostert goes down. So Jalen Wright's in active game 1, and the whole game plan was revolving around Devon Achane with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And we've seen this offense, like Mike McDaniel year 1, be so consolidated for 2 players. Now we're starting to see it get more consolidated for 3 players. It's so exciting to see Devon Achane get this sort of usage. I think a lot of people are also kicking themselves where they could have taken Devon Achane in the 2nd round and let him fall down to the 3rd round. This is another potential ADP smash. I love what we saw out of him usage-wise.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, and also, Johnny Smith didn't really play the way we thought he would. Played like half the pass snaps. I mean,
are you cutting him? I think he's a cut.
I think he's a cut.
I think he's a cut. It's sad to say.
It's a cut. And what's great is that the more you see Alec Ingold play, the more you see Durham Smythe play. Those are players that do not command targets, and it just consolidates the targets further. Not to mention, I checked in with Nathan Yankee over at PFF, see what he thought about the game there. And he said that last year, Raheem Mostert got 90%, more than 90% of the carries within 3 yards. This week, it was split even. They were willing to leave Devon Achane in there and give him the carries from the 1 or 2 yard line. Beautiful across the board if you grabbed him. I'll throw another guy out there that you could get a lot later. And on our channel over at Fantasy Alarm, I know with this show, there's a lot of deep cut gamers, you know, people playing on FFPC and NFC, the high stakes. But everybody's got a family league, right, Theo? You play in a couple family leagues, a couple, easy.
I'm familyless. I cut them all, Coop. I'm just in the streets right now. It's really sad, man.
You bounce.
I got no home leagues. I bounced on them.
For any of you guys out there that might have a new girlfriend and you jump in the league with the uncles or whatever, right? Everyone's been there at least once. I was telling people, I was like, do not let J.K. Dobbins be on your waiver wire in any sort of league. On FFPC, he's owned everywhere because of the 20-round drafts. But on a site like ESPN, he was owned in like less than 40% of leagues. I was like, do not let this guy be out there because we don't know what it looks like. We do know what Gus Edwards looks like because we've seen him get the opportunity a million times, and he always just looks like Gus Edwards, which is fine. But we need a shot of upside. We need to look at Dobbins. We need to look at Kamani Vidal, who didn't even play this time around. But J.K. Dobbins looked explosive. We can't just come out and say, hey, he's the Dobbins that he was before all the injuries, which was an insane breakaway run rate player with huge home run hitting potential. But Dobbins came out and he looked just every bit as explosive as, guys like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs, who also have a lot of wear and tear, right? If you can break off a 30, 40, 50-yard chunk play, then that's all I need to see out of you. And J.K. Dobbins showed that this week. So if you scooped him up late, if you went 0 or hero RB, or if you snuck in there in the league with all the uncles, congratulations, because it looks like J.K. Dobbins could be the better back on a team that wants to run it every single time.
Yeah, and I love it. And he hit 19 plus miles per hour yesterday. Like on that, like we're talking about elite speed, breakaway speed, the things that we always wanted with J.K. Dobbins and then had disappointing injuries. And I think where you drafted him, just enjoy the ride. You don't need to trade. Don't need to sell high on him. If it's Dynasty, it's another matter. But redraft, you have the utility out of Dobbins. Just put him in your RB2 slot and enjoy the ride. Because, Coop, this story could end with another injury. But as long as you have him out there healthy, he's going to give you RB2 production. And, Coop, they get the Carolina Panthers this week. This is a smash game for Dobbins. This is a smash game for Ladd McConkey. This is a smash game for the LA Chargers defense. Panthers are awful. You could see like the storyline for Dobbins right now is like a slow drumbeat. But if he drops a 125 yards and 2 touchdown performance against the hapless Carolina Panthers, I think that's going to be the huge storyline heading into week 3 is the Dobbins comeback tour. So a lot of vibes in that locker room. It seems like there was They last time they played the Raiders, it was the beatdown. It was the game that got Brandon Staley, right? And to come back and beat them in the opening game on the road, I mean, that was pretty significant.
Dude.
For me, I'm going to talk about a dead zone back that absolutely smashed. And our friend Billy Muzio and I over at Player Profiler, I split a podcast with him as well called First Class Fantasy, and we have a Devon Achane versus Joe Mixon bet for the year for fantasy points scored. Ooh. And Mixon was his guy and Achane's my guy. And I got to say, Mixon looked awesome yesterday. And the usage that Mixon had was insane. Really difficult game against the Indianapolis Colts. And even in a game where wide receivers like Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs had their moments, Mixon is the story of the day. 30 carries, Coop, for 159 yards, and he adds 3 catches. Joe Mixon looked fantastic. It's almost like the ADPs for Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry should have been flipped. If you could go back and redraft right now based on what you've seen, you might make that decision. We don't want to be too reactionary.
I had it ranked that way, just so everybody out there knows. If you were at Fantasy Alarm, we had it ranked that way. We had Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon ahead of Derrick Henry, so you're welcome.
And Joe Mixon should have gone ahead of maybe Josh Jacobs there. You want to
probably? Yeah. I mean, Jacobs looked pretty clunky in the first part of the game. He salvaged it. He had a 9-22 and 32-yard run, but we'll see. The brute force volume is there, but I mean, Joe Mixon. Anyway, back to you.
So let's talk a little bit about trades. Because here at Redraft in 5, just like Dynasty Trades in 5, we are going to give you some trade targets that we think you should be attempting to get in your fantasy leagues. And we're going to drop 1 or 2 guys each week. And I want to kick it to you, Coop. Who is a player that you are looking to target, maybe as a buy low, maybe as a buy high this week?
Yeah, mine's a buy high because it's very difficult to buy super low. Like, it's so hard to go out and be like, oh, I'll just buy Chris Olave right now because the guy doesn't want to sell him and you don't want to pay full price, right? Or maybe you do. But and then it's also hard to buy super high on the high end guys, right? Like if a guy goes out, Tyreek Hill has a massive game and he's doing his handcuff celebration, it's impossible to buy that guy right now too, unless you're willing to way overpay. What I like to do is look at the guys we liked coming in that people don't view the way we always viewed them. They're not quite grasping what happened this weekend and admitting that maybe this guy can get back to his super high upside potential. For me, that's a guy like Chris Godwin, where people were viewing him as a wide receiver 3. I was viewing him as a wide receiver 2 with back end wide receiver 1 upside, right? The people that even have Godwin in many cases probably still just view him as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 without realizing that his role has changed back to the role that we wanted to see, back to the role he had when he was the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy, right? It's the same role that Cooper Kupp had when he had his monster season, the same role that CeeDee Lamb had when he had his crazy season that was 3rd all time, right? You play in the slot and then you move out wide for 2 wide receiver sets. Last year, Chris Godwin, during the regular season, only had 1 game of 17 where he played more snaps in the slot than he played out wide. He was an out wide player that played some slot, right? This year, with Liam Cohen coming in, who had worked with Cooper Kupp in the past, they said, this guy's going back in the slot. And what did we see? He played more snaps from the slot yesterday, 27 snaps in the slot, 21 out wide, than he's essentially done at any point during last year. He's back in the slot. The upside's tremendous for this guy. I mean, he led the team in receptions last year, despite his injured neck and bum knee. Like Chris Godwin, to me, is back to being that guy that is super consistent week to week and at any given time could have a massive blow-up week. If you can go get Chris Godwin, he's going to be in your lineup every single week for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting one. Mike Evans scores a touchdown yesterday. Jalen McMillan looked really, really good. Also played like 80% of snaps. But at the end of the day, this might not be as even like most weeks. I think that Chris Godwin, if he's getting this sort of usage, he's going to end up being the safety blanket. And we also saw where everything was sort of clicking correctly with that Washington game. Tampa Bay really, really handled him. Right. They're going to be challenged this week. This is Detroit Lions defense. This might be a Chris Godwin week, and Baker might just look to really a safety blanket underneath with Godwin. I think
Cooper Kupp just got 20 targets against this team. I think they know where the weak spots are.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point on the Kupp usage. They're definitely going to try to emulate that. And if you're going to look at a player you can kind of put in motion, use in different ways, it's Chris Godwin. They're not going to do that with Evans, and it's a lot to ask Jalen McMillan to be that guy right now, even though he's very, very good at football. For me, I am going to try to attempt it because I do think that there's a little bit of there's always fear in the community after week 1. It's not great process, but people do have frustration when the players they drafted early do not perform in week 1. And I think especially that can be especially the case with the one-off positions. Guys are watching players like Isaiah Likely and smashing, and then they're holding bags of some of these elite tight ends. We know that these guys are going to bounce back, Coop, but at the end of the day, I don't think your league mates always do. And I think that if you make a reasonable offer to acquire some of these elite tight ends, this is the time to do so. And for me, the one that I'm going to kick the tires on is Trey McBride, because his role is so strong in this offense that we could be talking about a league winner. He might drop a 25 burger this week, 90% routes run, and a 29% target share. This is like north of Travis Kelce smash year numbers. This is like next level. And this is not a new thing for McBride. McBride is a guy who has had multiple smash weeks. He came on so strongly. He's one of the most talented tight ends in football, but I'm going to heat check my league mates and see if they'd be willing to even entertain a Trey McBride trade. And I think this is a perfect 2-for-1 to offer a guy, if you have an extra wide receiver or an extra running back with a semi-strong tight end, I'm looking to make a 2-for-1 trade and try to acquire Trey McBride. I wouldn't even mind doing a 3-for-1 trade in leagues because and I know we're going to talk about waivers a little bit later, but the waiver wire on week 1, there's always going to be some utility from it. So I don't mind shedding off a few guys that maybe that manager wants to go with a bulk and maybe improve their depth, maybe improve their overall firepower in order for me to consolidate to a guy like Trey McBride. He could end up putting up strong wide receiver 2 numbers this year out of the tight end position. So I'm going to do everything I can to get him, and I think this might be the last window to do so.
Yeah, Rich Rebar pointed out, Rich Rebar had been talking about how Kyler Murray, although a great player and obviously a good fantasy player, had struggled pushing the ball down the field a bit. And he followed that up today by reporting that Kyler Murray on throws of over 10 yards went 0 for 7 this past week. So not
and
great.
He missed our guy, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide open. So how would the narrative today have been different if Marvin Harrison Jr. would have had a 50-yard touchdown to end the game?
Right. It changes everything. I mean, Jalen McMillan dropped one right in his hands too. He would have had 2 touchdowns, right? It's like the little things that happen. That's why we chase the usage. It's why we chase the targets. It's why we look at guys like Kyle Pitts and Trey McBride and their usage and we say, yep, sign me up for that because it's going to be good. And we look at some of these other guys, and it's like, oh, wow, that guy scored today, but he only played half the game. Let's move him along. Let's get this trade going. So I love the idea of trading for Trey McBride because of the elite guys, I mean, he was the one that probably looked the best in terms of usage and actual target share.
Yeah. I mean, it's locked in. And I think that's also I think there's going to be some self-scouting done with Arizona. They had some positives, but just the amount of Greg Dortch and the lack of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride overall stats, I think that'll be addressed. I think that this was one where they had the lead early and things maybe got a little too conservative, and then Buffalo comes back and wins the game. I think that this is one where I believe this is a very good Arizona team, and I think they'll adjust this week, and I think you'll see actually both of those guys do well. Well, Coop, we're talking about hammers. Who is a player that you can absolutely bank on that is going to have a smash week here in week 2?
Yeah, and this is where you're looking for bounce backs a lot of the time, and maybe you could even buy low on some of these guys. This one's tough because of name value, but with Jamar Chase, we did a little speculating, as my late grandfather used to always say, that maybe with Tyler Boyd gone, in the mix of players they have now, Jamar Chase could pick up more of those slot snaps, right? The way, we talk about CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Kupp and these guys going in the slot and then going out wide. With Tyler Boyd there, you got a slot guy. He can't play out wide. Their hands were kind of tied based on the personnel they had. Now with T. Higgins and Andre Yosivas and Jermaine Burton, these are all outside, right? There's no reason that he can't play more in the slot. That's what we're thinking. And yesterday he did play more than he typically does. I mean, 15 snaps from the slot for Jamar Chase is more than we generally would see for him, especially when he played a limited snap share in general. So Jamar Chase, for me, with this new usage and this team getting back on track and them having a better matchup this week that isn't really gonna slow things down. It's Kansas City, right? Like the Patriots wanted the game to be slow. That was the only way they could win. That's the only way they're gonna win any games, right? Guys like Aaron Rodgers, they slow the game down. Kansas City's the opposite. It's huck it, chuck it football. You have to throw against them. And we just watched this past week that Baltimore was able to get their guys, the ball plenty. Right. So for me, I look at Jamar Chase to have a big bounce back week with it and his new usage. I mean, the ceiling is still incredibly high.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like the slot usage for Chase is absolutely a dream. And this could be a sneaky game for Cincinnati. They looked very, very bad against New England, but I think the game flow could dictate that a guy like Chase could just have an absolute smash. They could be staring at 0-2 with a really, really bad result, but nobody has more wins against Kansas City than Joe Burrow.
Right.
People are kind of leaving him for dead right now, and certainly didn't look the part. But he's just got this kind of this aura when they go up against that defense for whatever reason. And Jamar Chase has also owned the Kansas City Chiefs in multiple performances throughout his career. So love that you're on that one. And I'll also go top. I'm going to go, you feed your studs, especially coming off of a poor performance. And this is a kind of a perfect storm because the Jameson Williams breakout game, Jameson Williams played fantastic. It was like everything you wanted to see from Jameson Williams in a breakout game. Like all the Jameson Williams stands are flexing right now so hard. But this is the Sun Gods team. This is Amon-Ra St. Brown's team. This is a fantastic player. And you're talking about a guy who finished with 3 catches for 14 yards on only 6 targets. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 15 targets this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're going to look to establish him early on. This is a massive bounce back. You've literally never seen this sort of performance from Amon-Ra. Like this is I got a stat from Fantasy Pros where this is the first time that he's played more than 50% of snaps and had less than 5 points. There was another stat floating around that 75% of snaps and 12 points. Like this is a guy that when he gets a high percentage of snaps, he delivers PPR numbers, and he averaged over 20 points per game last year. This is the focal point of the Detroit offense. They are going to get him right. Tampa Bay is a strong opportunity to get right. I think the Tampa Bay offense is good enough too, Coop, that they're going to put a little pressure on Detroit, and the game flow is going to be there for the Sun God to have a game. So we're both on the high-end wide receivers to smash, and I think it's good process. People, want to freak out a little bit about week 1, but, your studs are still your studs, and it didn't change after 1 week.
Right. They typically lean on this guy, but, with David Montgomery was running so well and no Aaron Donald up the middle, like David Montgomery won that game. Anyone that watched the overtime, it was just David Montgomery up the gut. When you got a big nose tackle run stopper like that, they're going to have to change up what they're doing here, and that's going to mean more Amon-Ra St. Brown, more Laporta, probably a little more Jahmyr Gibbs too. It's like when you have those kind of weapons, every once in a while you can just lean on one, and in most cases, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the guy they lean on.
No, I love it. And Coop, we want everybody to know we're also going to be dropping a video for Waiver Wire Advice. So check that out. Every single week, we're going to be dropping videos like this, giving you trade advice, giving our biggest reactions from the previous week. But we're also going to be dropping a second video for Waiver Wire Advice. So look for that one here, and we will see you soon.